and welcome to this week's Hippie Hyena. To make my life easier, I like to cultivate a very right-wing feed by subscribing to a bunch of the craziest nut jobs I can find, and many of them feature on my channel. And then what happens is the algorithm starts recommending me other crazy nonsense, which I can also use. Now this week, I've got to apologise in a sense because it's probably going to be woefully unfunny. The reason why is we're taking a look at some conservative comedy that turned up on my feed from a guy called Ryan Long, who runs a YouTube channel with Vox Pops, a podcast, and a bunch of sketches, all with a conservative attitude. And we're going to take a look mostly at the sketches, have a think about them, see if we can work out what the joke is, what he's trying to say, and probably why it's not very funny. Let's take a look. So first up is a sketch called If Netflix Employees Worked at Other Companies. So that's the premise.
Hello.
Hey there.
It's, Ed, him. Nice to meet you.
How are you? I heard a lot about you from your father. He obviously arranged this interview. So tell me, why do you want to work in landscaping?
Well, I would love to be the person that tells other people what decks they're allowed to buy. And for example, I noticed this is your best-selling deck right here, and I'd like to stop construction on that effective immediately. And that's just for starters of what I have planned for the company.
What? No, that's a huge portion of our business, that deck. We're not halting.
Not anymore. It's not going to be.
Okay.
Okay, so the concept here appears to be that they're sort of implying that Netflix, for some mad reason, is sort of rejecting good business practice in order to promote their own opinions, which is patently absurd. Just is completely ridiculous. It kind of goes into a worldview. They have this worldview that they can't sort of break out of course, in which they are the majority and most people, most ordinary, hardworking Americans think like they do, but they don't. So the thing is, when Netflix, decides to put, black people in something, or gay characters, or whatever else it is that they do that these guys don't like, they're not doing it. They're not doing it because they want to promote some sort of agenda. They're doing it because it's good business. Because most people, the majority of their customers, the majority of people who have money to spend on Netflix like that stuff. Immediately, the sort of premise of this sketch just completely breaks down because it's just based on some very bizarre assumptions. Of course, Netflix are doing it to make money because they're a corporation and that's what corporations do. So it would kind of make more sense if, for some reason, the employer was sort of stuck in the past and thinking that everyone wanted some kind of old-fashioned or awkward and inconvenient deck, but the Netflix employee was coming in and saying, look, this is bad for business. The public don't want this. Let's give the public what they want, and then we'll earn money. It would be equally as unfunny as this sketch is, but at least it'd be accurate or make some kind of sense. Because this sketch, only makes sense if you're kind of insane and believe some extremely bizarre things, which the vast majority of people don't believe. It's like someone saying, hey, here's some observational humor for you. Isn't it funny how women just love dressing up like ducks and quacking all the time? Isn't that funny? Have you noticed that? And the audience is like, no, they don't. What the hell are you talking about? And they're left with more of a kind of confusion than humor.
What about this deck right here? I don't know if you're familiar with this one through your research. We've been doing a lot of installs on these right here. It's very popular. We're doing one at the Wilsons next week.
Yeah, that's not going to work for me.
What do you mean it's not going to work for you?
Well, for starters, there should be a couple wheelchair ramps on each side. And that's just the tip of the iceberg for what's wrong with this deck.
That's an option we offered. They didn't order it. They ordered this deck right here.
Yeah, well, I'm of the mind we should be telling people what they want. And who are these Wilsons anyway? What do we know about them? Should we have been working with these people?
Here's another sort of really weird accusation to sort of level at Netflix, as if like Netflix is just forcing people to watch particular shows. I mean, for a start, you don't need to get Netflix. If you don't like it, just don't get it. You know, it's fine. Nobody cares. But second of all, even if you do have Netflix, there are a lot of shows on Netflix. You know, there's a lot of TV shows, there's a lot of movies. Like, if you don't like one, you'll probably find another that you do like. You know, there is a whole host of content, and I'm sure there's almost certainly content on there which will suit, for example, conservatives. I mean, it depends like how crazy and conservative they are. But you know, if you want a sort of completely batshit insane conservative hardline kind of nonsense station, then you can go and watch like Pure Flix movies, you know, or like I don't know what else. I'm not into that. I don't watch it. But there's a lot of media out there for people who want other things. The idea that sort of like, you know, it's like turning up at, say, McDonald's and saying, I don't like Big Macs, so you guys need to change what you do. And they're like, well, you know, we also offer McChicken sandwiches. God, you're always trying to control what I do. Well, you could just go to another restaurant, sir. I can't. I literally can't. I mean, Jesus, I'm making up better sketches here. But admittedly, that was a shit sketch. But it's still better than this bollocks. Okay, next up, we've got a sketch called Robin Announces He's Super Not Gay. So let's dig in, if we have to, into what this is going to be.
To be honest, when I broke the news to Batman, I was a bit worried that he was going to see me differently. So as you probably heard, the studio asked me to do some sexual exploration, and after months of exploring, I realized that I'm attracted to a different piece of pussy every night.
You see how there was that sort of like pause for laughter there after he said that busting pussy every night or whatever he said, like, as if that was a sort of like a big kicker of a joke. Where is the joke though? Like, I don't really get it. I don't get this at all. So it seems to be, so they're saying in the comics, Robin, I guess, I don't really read Batman, but they're saying that Robin is exploring his sexuality, by which they probably mean that he's seeing if that he might be bisexual or whatever else, you know, which is sort of, I guess, like they've got to connect with the youth, and that's kind of like a reasonable behavior for a Zoomer these days, you know. I think as each new generation comes, people are becoming a little bit more open with what they're into and trying to experiment to see what they like, which is a good thing. And so obviously Robin in the comics has always been a kind of audience proxy to a certain extent. That's why he's like a boy wonder as opposed to like a bloke. He's supposed to be sort of similar age to their target audience, at least at that time when he was invented. And he always kind of has been a representative of the sort of readers, or the way that DC Comics imagines that their readers are. And so it sort of makes sense that they are having Robin engage with the current zeitgeist of being young and finding out who you are. It's a no-brainer, really. But it seems as though these people are trying to satirize that, like point out how absurd that is when it isn't absurd, by converting it from him being gay to being kind of a misogynist. It's kind of hard to figure out what that exchange does comedically, what the purpose of that is. Like, are they sort of saying something like they're kind of lamenting the fact that exploring sexuality as a phrase tends to refer to experimenting with same-sex relationships or multiple partners or that sort of thing, and doesn't relate necessarily to sort of heterosexual situations? But like, of course it wouldn't, because in our society, the way it's set up, for the most part, heterosexuality is kind of the default. So you wouldn't explore doing the same thing that has always been done. Like, that's not really expanding your horizons. It's kind of the opposite. It's something that I noticed quite a lot amongst conservatives. They're like, yeah, I'm being rebellious. I'm breaking away from the norm by following the things that old white men from 100 years ago thought. It's like really kind of the opposite of that. In the same way you can't explore new horizons which are just the old horizons and nothing outside of them. That doesn't count.
Okay,
I don't even want to get the girls' names. I'm just busting nuts at anyone I can, and I'm hoping that you can accept me for who I am.
all right, sure. Ever since Robin started to explore his sexuality, he's been a bit different.
Holy smell, my fingers.
Oh, God, Robin, God damn it.
It turns out I'm a freak for the strange.
You clogged the toilet with all your jizz rags. He barely comes into work anymore, and when he does, all he's doing is showing me pictures of new tail he's crushing.
Holy slobbing on Robin, Batman.
Okay. I'm sort of seeing what they're trying to do now. Oh dear. Very, very unfunny and just kind of tired. It's making me tired watching it. Is it making you tired? I mean, surely the purpose of comedy is to sort of uplift, I suppose, and sometimes ask interesting questions, but not to leave the audience feeling fatigued, weary, and sort of actively bored. You know, it's not the sort of bored that kind of comes about as a lack of things to do or look at, but it's a kind of boredom that's a kind of like active boredom, as if it's like radiating a kind of boredom energy. Because this sketch is sort of doing the sort of bizarre conservative thing of over-sexualizing people's sexual preferences. It's like, to them, it seems as though they believe that heterosexuality is sort of PG and suitable for children and but anything outside of that is presented as, or they believe it to be kind of X-rated and super sexier than ordinary sex, which is a sort of really bizarre kind of thing. You know, nobody made that comment about when Lois Lane and Superman, for example, were getting together. No one was like, this is forcing sex on our children. You know, when Clark Kent and Lois Lane had a baby together, no one was like, this is forcing sex on our children, because, you know, obviously you can't have a baby without sex, so it definitely implied that Lois and Clark were doing it, but nobody had a problem with that. That apparently is very PG, it's absolute or universal, it's family friendly, you know, it's fine. But when, like, a boy kisses another boy, apparently that's, for some weird reason, that's pornography, which I think sort of goes to say sort of more about the degree to which they find it personally arousing. That's not to sort of, you know, blame gay people for anti-gay stuff, because obviously there are a lot of straight people who are perfectly capable of subjugating and abusing gay people, perfectly capable of being homophobic. But I do think there is something to be said about the undue interest that these people seem to have in other people's sex lives. That seems to me to be extremely bizarre and very suspect. What I mean by that in relation to this sketch is, like, all of this, like, inappropriate sexual stuff in the workplace is just, it's purely in their heads, right? It's just literally a them problem. Like, they can't have it so that a person around them is openly bi or gay or whatever without them having their heads filled with all sorts of sordid and torrid fantasies about that person having a lot of graphic sex. Which is really weird. It's really, really weird.
Can we go 2 minutes without talking about your escapades?
If you don't mind, I'm gonna dip out early tonight, going to an orgy.
Yeah, do you mind, Robin? Thought he was gonna say he's non-binary or something like the Riddler. Turns out he's smashing puss like the Penguin.
You thought it was gonna be non-binary?
Yeah, you just said you were exploring.
Yeah, I'm exploring different positions I can put him in. You ever do this one, by the way? With jackhammer, where you sort of just, like, come out from the top?
And that's basically the end of the sketch. Well, it goes on and on, you know, in the same vein as that, but it doesn't change. It's just him sort of, in a sense, kind of sexually harassing Batman in a place of work, and sort of making an equivalency between that and just somebody quietly being gay or bi or whatever it is they want to be. It's really weird, and it sort of I think speaks to their lack of understanding of consent. And I don't mean like sexual consent. I just mean conservatives seem to not be able to understand, have this sort of like mental block. They don't seem to understand about where one person's rights end and the other person's begin. Like they struggle with that very intensely, or rather, they don't struggle with it. They just can't understand it. They can't understand why somebody else doing what they want to do, being gay or whatever, doesn't affect them. If they don't want to be gay, they can just not be. It's like, you know, back in the day when there was the debate over gay marriage, which in certain circles is still ongoing, but when it was a more sort of, you know, centralized issue that people were debating publicly, it's like they kind of didn't understand that they didn't have to get gay married. They could still just get straight married if they want. Like, it literally didn't affect them in any meaningful sense at all. But for some reason, allowing someone else to do that, they felt as though it affected their rights, which it clearly didn't. And in order to sort of express how they feel about that, they have to create this bizarre scenario that is so sort of removed from reality, that requires a kind of extensive L-O-R-E kind of explanation in order of their sort of weird and fucked up worldview, in order to understand it even on a baseline as to what the hell they're talking about. And then by that point, you've still got a way to go before it becomes in any way funny. And that's kind of the problem. That's kind of the problem in general with conservative humor, that because conservatism is fundamentally based on absurdities, to find it funny, you have to do so much legwork that it basically just falls apart. Completely bizarre. Completely bizarre. Anyway, I hope you learned something from this. I feel like I didn't. But I hope you got something out of it. Hippie Hyena out. Goodbye.